This is the Allant Plus 8S, which is the mid-tier option of Trek's top-of-the-line commuter e-bike. And it includes some really cool tech as part of its Bosch drive system. So how does it feel and function on the road? Let's take a ride and find out. Hey everyone, I'm John with Electric Bike Report. We've got a lot to talk about today, but before we get started, please make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and that you also have notifications turned on. This makes sure you don't miss any of the reviews that we post a couple times every week, so you can make the best decision when you're shopping for an e-bike. So the Allant Plus is one of 3 electric commuter bikes in Trek's lineup. There are 4 different trim packages for this bike, each of which come in 2 frame styles, but we'll be talking strictly about this version, which is the high-step 8S model. One of the big highlights for me was the Bosch drive system, which includes a 250-watt Performance Line Speed mid-drive motor. This motor felt really powerful, and it could bring the bike up to its Class 3 speed limit of 28 miles per hour, and it's also really smooth. So if it wasn't for the slight whine that I heard when the motor was working, it would have been pretty easy to forget I was actually riding an e-bike. Another element that separates the Allant Plus from many other commuters on the market is its ability to pair with Bosch's COBI.BIKE app. This acts as the bike's dashboard, which also connects to your favorite music, navigation, fitness, and ride tracking apps, so you have control over all of those aspects of your riding experience from a central location. Apps that pair with your e-bike are not uncommon, but this one felt like a step above, so I'll actually walk you through the entire app and its functionality a little bit later in the review. Another one of the first things that jumped out to me was just this bike's overall solid and stable feel. It also seemed really maneuverable and agile, which was a combination I didn't expect from a bike that weighs 57 pounds. But the rigid fork and the 27.5-inch by 2.4-inch tires made a big difference in the bike's overall handling. Those tires are the E6 hard case light model from Bontrager, which is owned by Trek, and they're just one or 2 of the huge number of Bontrager parts on the bike. Those include the 600 or 660 millimeter handlebars, depending on frame size, as well as the commuter comp saddle, the comp seat post, the Satellite Elite rubber grips, the city pedals, and other components like the stem, the wheel hubs, etc. I'll run through the rest of the components here, but I do want to point out that there are a handful of parts with different but comparable options listed on the bike spec sheet. I'll talk about the parts on our test bike here, but just know that if you buy an Allant Plus 8S, you may need to contact Trek directly to know what specific components you'll be getting. The bike's Bosch drive system also includes the 36-volt battery, which is removable and has a 625 watt-hour capacity. That's pretty substantial in relation to the motor's nominal wattage, and it means that the bike can stay out for long rides between charges. Stay tuned for specifics on that in our range test section a little bit later on, but let's keep moving. The 8S comes with a 10-speed, mostly Shimano drivetrain with a Dior shifter and derailleur and a 46-tooth Pro Wheel chainring. Ours had a 10 to 42-tooth Dior cassette. The hydraulic brake system here is the 4-piston Orion model from Tektro with 180 millimeter rotors. There are front and rear fenders included, as well as a cargo rack with a 31-pound carrying capacity. The rear fender includes a tiny pulsating tail light. There's a 500 lumen LED headlight up front, and while there wasn't a way to turn the lights off, we did have the ability to switch between a high and low beam with one of the modules on the left handlebar. The cockpit here is pretty interesting. The bike includes a basic black and white display that's recessed behind a spring-loaded universal phone mount. The Bosch app allows your smartphone to be used as a full color display, and the 6-button control panel on the left handlebar syncs with the app, so you have easy access to all of its functions. But to wrap this section up, the Allant Plus 8S is UL 2849 compliant. It's available in 2 color options, matte metallic gunmetal and the lithium gray that we have here. And since pricing changes so much, we'll leave a link down in the video description so you can see what's current. But for now, let's move on and talk about the bike's test results. We tested the Tektro hydraulic brake system on the 8S by pedaling up to 20 miles per hour, hitting the brakes, and measuring the distance the bike took to stop. We repeated the process 3 times and averaged all of the results to get a stopping distance of 21 feet 1 inch. This is a simply excellent result in general that also happens to be better than average when compared to similar commuter bikes we tested. That current average is 21 feet 10 inches. The difference here largely comes down to the fact that these are 4-piston brakes and some of the better ones Tektro offers. Brakes of this caliber are relatively uncommon among the commuters we've tested, and most of the time they show up on fat tire bikes, mountain bikes, or cargo bikes. So Trek went above and beyond by including a really effective system here. Just going by feel from my personal testing, I felt like I could stop on a dime with these brakes, and they kept the bike firmly under my control even when I was bombing down a couple of steep hills. They had really good modulation and overall stopping power, so it's pretty easy for me to give the 8S a very solid 2 thumbs up in our brake test. I rode the Allant Plus 8S on our local bike paths in each of its pedal assist settings to see how fast it could go with a consistent level of effort. Let's go out together for a speed test, and we'll meet back here shortly to talk about the results. All right, we are here on the Trek Allant Plus 8S to do a speed test, and I'm pedaling here with no help from the motor by the bike's display, going around 13 miles per hour, going by this app that we've been using around, I don't know, 11 and a half, 12, something like that. So we'll go by the bike, but so a peak of right about 13 and a half here right now, actually. Let's go up to eco mode. You can hear that motor kick in right away. Very smooth, pretty subtle. Definitely still feels like a normal bike, just with a little extra, push. Little easier on the pedaling. Let's move up to, or I'm sorry, we're looking at about 14 and a half, maybe up to 15 miles per hour here. I'll jump up to tour mode, so second PAS setting. Pedaling is noticeably easier, and just very smooth here. Almost doesn't feel like I'm riding an e-bike, but easily getting up to about 19 miles per hour here. 19 on the dot, a little over now. Let's go ahead and jump up to sport mode. I'm trying to keep my level of effort pretty consistent here so we can observe, the differences between settings. This is a class 3 e-bike, so we are, pretty easily getting up here over 22 miles per hour, about 22 and a half. And then let's jump up to the final mode, which is turbo. Give it all she's got. Gonna shift up again. And again, kind of trying to dial in with the same level of effort here. Going a little over 25 miles per hour, 25.2. So we'll call that our speed test on the Trek Allant Plus 8S. So the 8S uses a mid-drive motor with a torque sensor to detect how much effort you're putting in, which is why that consistent and moderate level of effort was so important. The speeds I measured are gonna be fairly average, so if you're pedaling harder or softer than I was, you'll probably have slightly different results. I was able to go faster than I expected without any help from the motor, up to 13.4 miles per hour. The Allant Plus has 4 pedal assist settings, so when I moved up through those, I hit 14.7 miles per hour in eco mode, 19.2 in tour mode, 22.4 in sport, and 25.2 miles per hour in turbo. When looking at that data in a graph, the speeds I recorded showed a really even distribution of power, which made a lot of sense with how the bike felt when I was riding it. Each of the assist settings felt distinct, so there was a noticeable power difference between them that made the ride faster and easier as I stepped up into the next highest setting. I liked that the different power levels just felt right, and I also liked that the bike could reach 28 miles per hour right out of the box. Obviously, I didn't hit that limit in this test with a moderate level of effort, but the bike definitely had no trouble getting there with a little bit more work. Bottom line, I think the 8S did a great job here, and I had a lot of fun with how fast the bike could go if I really wanted it to. We took the Allant Plus 8S out on our local paths another time for 2 separate range tests. We rode the bike in turbo mode and then again in eco mode until it ran out of charge to get an idea of its minimum and maximum range. So based on these tests, you should expect somewhere between 29.8 and 74.8 miles on a single charge, depending on your environment and how you ride. Now, Trek doesn't advertise a range for this bike, but if we compare our data to the other commuter style e-bikes we've tested, the 8S came in towards the middle. That's not to say that there's anything lacking in these results. I actually think it did a really good job here, but we've had a handful of outliers in this category that have way overperformed, so those bikes skewed the data a little bit more than we expected. It is worth pointing out that the motor and battery pairing were a little less efficient than we commonly see on e-bikes with mid-drives. Based on the motor and battery specs, we had about 35% less time and 46% fewer miles than we expected. Overall though, the neighborhood of 30 to 75 miles is really solid, and I think that makes sense for a commuter bike that might need to cover a lot of ground on a daily basis. For those who do need even more though, Trek offers a separate external range boost battery that mounts to the down tube with an extra 500 watt hours, which translates to an 80% increase in total capacity. As always, I'm gonna pass you over to Justin for our hill test. He pedaled the Allant Plus 8S up the path at Hellhole Trail in turbo mode to see how much of a difference the motor would make. Take a look at his experience and I'll see you back here soon.
We're at Hellhole with the Trek Allant Plus 8S. This has the Bosch Performance Speed Line mid-drive motor, which is a 250 watt motor, 600 peak. And really curious to see how this feels. The bike pedals much more like a normal bike. And wanted to see how much effort to get up this hill. So right now we're at about 8 miles an hour, 8.6, and feels pretty powerful. I'm not trying to push this too hard myself. I know I could go faster, but with these mid-drive motors I always try to kind of put in the same amount of effort. Let the motor do a bit of it, but obviously it's going to amplify what I put in, right? So far going up, this feels good. A lot of times these kind of city commuter bikes, the mid-drives end up being underpowered on hills, and I'm not as big of a fan, but I really like the feel of this motor so far. We'll see what the results come in at, but I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I say you'll be able to climb hills and kind of feel just more like a, you know, pro level cyclist. Bosch is very well known with their motors. You do have that whine that I hear, you know, it's like a higher pitched whine, but it does kind of fade to the background. You forget about it. Other than that, very smooth, very good motor all the way around. So go to the tape and see how it did.
So with no throttle on the Allant Plus, Justin only had to do one test here, and you could see him pedaling pretty casually, but still very easily making it up to the top of the hill. His time there was 1 minute and 43 seconds, and he was able to keep an average speed of 10.5 miles per hour. So an interesting thing there, the data once again shows the 8S coming in pretty average in terms of time and speed when compared to similar bikes we've tested, but we all had the opinion that this bike felt a bit more powerful than average. I tested the 8S at a secondary location near the office and had a very similar experience. Again, even with this bike having a mid-drive motor that requires some effort, I was really surprised by how pleasant and easy it felt to pedal up a steep hill. We attribute the bike's overall feel to the Bosch drive system here. The 250 watt motor kicks out 85 Newton meters of torque and peaks at 600 watts, and Bosch claims that it returns 340% of the effort that you put in. We can't exactly verify that, but I can tell you that you won't have any problems when it comes to climbing hills. Let's go out for another ride on the Allant Plus 8S to talk about the basic elements of its ride quality, and then we can come back here for a little bit more detail.
All right, we are back on the Trek Allant Plus 8S to give you a sense of what it's like to ride. And this is of course a commuter style e-bike with a mostly upright riding position, a little bit of a forward lean, but you know, it's still very comfortable. Not too aggressive. There are technically 4 frame sizes split across the 2 frame styles, and together those accommodate riders from 5'1" up to 6'6", and that's good. That's very important to find the frame size that does fit you best. You have some adjustment in your saddle height with the seat post, and of course the rails on the saddle to adjust your reach a tiny bit, but you know, if you want any major changes to your handlebar height or your reach, you'd need to look at adding spacers or swapping out the stem for something else. This is a standard style stem. There is no suspension on this version of the bike. This is the rigid alloy frame on the 8S, but I've got to give some credit to the tires here. 27.5 inch by 2.4 inch tires. These are the Bontrager E6 hard case light model. So with that width, you get, you know, good stability when you're riding and maneuvering, and you can also ride with a little bit lower pressure to kind of help absorb some vibrations, which, you know, makes a big difference on stuff like this where the pavement is a little bit rougher. And then we need to talk about the motor. That is a 250 watt mid-drive from Bosch. It is the Performance Line Speed model. And of course that uses a torque sensor to detect how much pressure you're applying to the pedals, but it also delivers power really smoothly and consistently, excuse me. So, you know, it can still detect changes to your pedaling, but it's not all over the place in terms of how much power it's spitting out, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's bounce back to the studio and talk about those things and a little bit more.
So as I mentioned, there are 3 frame sizes and 2 frame styles for the Allant Plus 8S. There's the high step version that we have here, which comes in medium, large, and extra large for riders between 5'5" and 6'6". And then the step through or stagger version comes in small, medium, and large with a height range of 5'1" to 6'1". I'm 5'11", and I was right in the middle of the size range for the large frame, and I've got to say the fit seemed absolutely perfect. To go into a bit more detail on the Bosch drive system, the motor's feel was really consistent, which differs from some other high-end mid-drives that amplify very small changes in your pedaling. I noticed that this Performance Line Speed motor kind of smooths out the extremes, so you end up with a really steady output that's still able to adjust and respond to your effort. The COBI.BIKE app is worth diving into a little deeper as well. It's one of the more functional apps I've seen, so I actually want to go back out one last time on the Allant and walk you through its features. Let's go check it out. Okay, we are back again on the Trek Allant Plus 8S. Wanted to do something a little bit different and kind of walk you through the COBI.BIKE app as I'm actually riding and using it. You know, we can do a screen grab at the same time so you can see what's going on, but doing that in the studio doesn't have quite the same effect. So here I've got the dashboard pulled up where you can see kind of your standard array of ride data, speedometer, got an average speed, trip time and distance, battery charge level with an estimated range based on that, as well as a clock and a thermometer, so current temperature reading. But as you move through your pedal assist settings like this,
Sport, 34 miles range,
it gives you an update of your estimated range based on the battery level. And then on the right hand side of the screen is kind of where all the action happens. This is the navigation section, so if I go into the expanded view for that, I can swap between a 3D view and sort of a top-down view, zoom in and out to kind of see where I am in the world. And then there is, if I was stopped, there's a way to plan a route, and then it gives you turn-by-turn navigation in that. Also includes a compass so you know what direction you're going in. But let's go back to the main area.
contacts,
Next is contacts, so you can sync up to 10 contacts with this app and have access to them. You can make calls if you have Bluetooth earbuds, and if you have addresses listed for those contacts, you can actually pull that up quickly in the navigation section as well. But I'm not going to go into the full screen view because then it just starts calling, and I don't want to do that right now. But next is the music function, which syncs with Apple Music, Spotify, Audible, all that stuff. And if we go in there, we can, you know, scroll through our tracks. We can play and pause as needed. And you know, nice to have quick access to that without using a different app. And then finally, yes, the fitness side of things here, where you're keeping track of a few different things here. If I had a smartwatch, it would show my heart rate. Right now I have it kind of focusing on my cadence, which current cadence at the top, average cadence at the bottom, and then sort of a measure of that at the ring around the center there. And then also the power output of the bike in watts here, with again a current and an average there. So altogether very functional, nice hub of all your apps, your ride data. Really expands the versatility and functionality of this bike. So let's call it there and go back to the studio. So I love that app, but I would like to see a sturdier phone mount in the future, although that's less of a Trek thing and more of a note for Bosch. The top section of the mount is kind of a spring-loaded clamp that felt kind of flimsy, and in fact it did break during our testing, so I ended up having to use a separate phone mount. I mentioned earlier that the light system is always on, which our contact at Trek told us was an intentional choice for safety. As long as your local bike shop services Bosch systems though, you can take your bike in and have that changed if you prefer to be able to activate or deactivate the lights. One final area of critique is the absence of brake lights. I'm a big stickler for safety, and while I appreciate that this tail light kind of pulsates for visibility, I think it's important to be able to communicate better with other people on the road, especially on a Class 3 bike. Turn signals would be a great addition as well, but brake lights would be a really solid starting point. Critique aside, I think the Allant Plus offers a genuinely elevated ride feel. Part of that comes down to the bike's construction and the use of great components, but the user interface also made it feel like way more than just a bike. This is a true electric vehicle with a lot of the same functionality that you'd get in a car, and I think that's just really cool. It's pretty clear at this point that the Allant Plus 8S did a great job of fulfilling its role as a commuter e-bike. It absolutely met our expectations in terms of measurable performance, and at the same time it delivered a more premium feel and greater functionality than we expected. In places, it might have seemed fairly ordinary on paper, but there was a noticeable difference between our data and my experiences in those instances. For example, the 8S was fairly average at climbing hills when going by the numbers, while in fact it felt a bit more powerful than average when I was actually on the bike. That premium feel definitely exists here, and in my mind, that is the thing that matters most. That is exactly why we explain our testing, but also bring it back to a personal level after we spend a good chunk of time in the saddle. Bottom line, if you're looking for a dependable, comfortable, nimble, and high-tech e-bike with an absolute ton of functionality between all of the apps that you rely on a daily basis, I think you'll really love the Allant Plus 8S. There really is something different about bikes like this from a legacy brand like Trek, and I happily give it 2 very solid thumbs up. If you think the 8S is the bike for you, you can make a purchase through our affiliate link to Trek's website down in the video description. And if you want to dive into a bit more detail, please check out the other link to our written review as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please let us know if you have any questions. But thanks for watching. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Trek Allant Plus 8S.